Hi, everyone. Welcome to Joy in Dementia. It's great to have you here. And I am Laura, CEO and founder of Befriended Heart, where I help daughters navigate their parents' dementia. So today I am really excited to share with you a topic that has been pretty relevant in my life lately. As you guys know, if you've been watching my channel, I moved my dad into memory care last month. And I actually saw a presentation by this person that I'm bringing in on the channel. She is going to be talking about how to move the forgetful parent, so that's your parent with dementia, to memory care. Just to be very clear, instead of using lots of words for like parent living with dementia, I'm just going to call it your forgetful parent. And then your other parent that's supporting, or probably living with your forgetful parent is your caregiving parent. So now that we got the definitions down, I am going to do the introduction on my friend Peggy Breda. So Peggy is the founder and owner of A Family Tie that's here in Virginia. And so Peggy and I are on the Dementia Friendly Herndon Committee, which I think I've talked about on my Facebook business page. She also has 25 years of experience working in senior living. And she started A Family Tie to apply that experience that she has and her relationships with different communities in the area to help families find a community, but not just like any community. It would be the best fit for the family's needs, because as we know, everyone is different. Everyone has different preferences. And just like when you're moving into a new apartment complex, right? Like you know what feels good and what doesn't to you. So it's very similar when you're moving someone with dementia into memory care. So Peggy, welcome to Joy in Dementia. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and for having me to share some tips that might help families when they're making this really challenging decision.
Awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your expertise?
Sure. As you mentioned, I do have 25 years of senior living experience, being a manager as well as helping families move in. So I started my career as a sales and marketing specialist for independent living, assisted living, and memory care. I was 24 years old, so it was really when all this was very new and nobody really knew about assisted living, or it was just starting to come out. So I kind of grew with that, and then recently started a business because through that 25 years, I found that when people are making decisions like moving a parent, whether they have dementia or not, it's usually during a very stressful time, emotional time, overwhelming time. And they're not always asking the right questions, thinking of the right things. So I really felt that, and companies that kind of do what I do weren't really helping. They were really just saying, oh, here's 5 communities, go look. But families need more help than that. So here I am today.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for being here. And so do you have any personal experience with dementia? Like, have you been a caregiver for any family members or friends?
I haven't. I don't have anyone in my family yet. But as I mentioned, I was 24 years old when I started. And just kind of being so young, I really connected with, especially the dementia population. I also have a physical limitation that I had, as a young child, which I think really helped me empathize with that population, the dementia population, because they're people just like me and you, just like I was, but they have challenges to overcome every day. And so having that as a young child and growing up and overcoming many of those challenges, I really saw that a similarity in the dementia population. I think that's why I connected so much with it.
So before we get into the recommendations, if you can kind of talk about like your definition of home and why this might be helpful for daughters to know when searching for a community for their parent.
Sure. So when most of us think about home, we might think of a physical place, the home that we're living in now, the home that we grew up in, um, you know, wherever we're living, an apartment, a house. But when you think really, you dig deep into what that word means, it's not really a physical place. It's a place where you have memories. It's a place where you feel comfortable. It's a place where you feel warm and loved and right, all's right with the world when you're at home. So when I think of home, or when you have a loved one who it moves into a community, or even at home is saying, I want to go home, and you say, Dad, what do you mean you are home? I don't believe that they're actually talking about a physical place. I believe that they're talking about, I want to go back to that place where I feel good again. I want to go back to that place where I feel whole again and comfortable. And when we have a cognitive impairment, we don't always feel that way, especially in the early to moderate stages, where we still have understanding, we still have awareness, we still have those things. So when people say, I want to go home, and just in my experience in learning, I used to think it was a physical place too. Um, but in reality, they're saying, I want to go back where I feel comfortable and where I feel safe. So it's really a cue, I think, for us as caregivers to say, wow, it's dad wants to feel comfortable again. Mom wants to feel happy again. That's really what I believe anyway. And just in my 25 years of working with this population, that's what they're saying.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think that um, concept makes it a lot easier when you are, starting that transition of, moving your parent and doing the whole process. So I know that this is a question in everyone's mind right now. How do you know when is a good time to start considering a move for your forgetful parent?
So that's a big question, and people struggle with this all the time. I have clients right now that should be moving their spouse in this particular case, and he just can't do it. But in reality, the time to move someone isn't when you think um, the forgetful parent, is ready. It's really when the caregiving parent is ready. And what I mean by that is, or even as a daughter, as the population that you're talking to, when you start noticing that the caregiving parent is exhausted, is tired, is getting sick, is going to the hospital, is, just not their self anymore, that is really when I believe is the best time. Because ultimately, that caregiving parent is saying, I want to care for my loved one. This is what I chose to do. This is my spouse till death do us part, the all of that I know the emotions that people go through. But in reality, if that caregiving parent wears himself so far down that they pass away, then they're not going to be there for that person that they love and care about. So it's really important that we're looking at the cues, not just on the person with dementia, but also especially for the caregiving parent.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned about, the possibility of the caregiving parent, passing away. I think I mentioned this in one of my past videos, but research has shown that the caregiving parent is actually more likely to pass away before the forgetful parent.
That's
So that's
very
why
true.
it's so important for us as daughters. And, one of the main reasons why I started Befriended Heart is to share that burden. So then your caregiving parent is not getting burnt out. So I think it's also, our responsibility as long distance daughters to call our parents and check in, especially try to make that call during the afternoon or the evening, because that's when you'll know how exhausted your caregiving parent is, and you can kind of gauge, from 1 month to like 6 months of caregiving, how that's going, right? So
That's very true. I mean, so typically people with a cognitive impairment, they get more tired at the end of the day. Obviously, the caregiving parent is tired at the end of the day. But I also want folks to really recognize that if you call your parent with dementia, and even if, let's say they don't have a spouse, and let's say they're living at home alone and they're in the earlier stages, and you're like, oh, yeah, they're doing great. People with dementia can put on a good show
oh,
for
yeah.
about an hour or two. because they muster up all their resources and they have a good conversation. So call at different times of the day too. So let's say you're not going to be able to call your dad until the only time you have is 10 o'clock in the morning. Call at 10 o'clock in the morning, but make an effort to call also later that day or a different day in the afternoon, so you get a better picture. It really is very important.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think, um, especially for a caregiving parent that, you know, can't share how things are really going, whether they're not ready to, or they just can't really grasp the idea that they're losing their partner, that it's something that you can do sort of more objectively as a daughter and sort of just compare in your observations. If your mom or your dad sounds a lot more tired than usual when you chat with them. And I would say too, um, you know, I think this is really important too that you mentioned, Peggy, is like when in the dementia stages is the best time to move your forgetful parent. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So kind of mid stages where they're still be able to engage, they're still able to have conversations. Granted, it may not be big conversations, but still able to answer and talk to people, participate in different social functions. Um, because if you wait, for example, till that person is no longer verbal, no longer really able to engage, they're going to be in a state of anxiety for much longer, trying to understand, where am I? What is this? If you can, when I used to run communities, I was training my caregivers, I used to tell them, think about going on vacation or going to a place you've never been before and waking up and looking around and going, I think we've all had this experience. Wait, where am I? And you look around and you're like, oh yeah, right, Florida. I'm in Florida, right? But for a parent with dementia, when you wake up and you look around and you don't know where you are, they're not able to reconcile, oh yeah, my daughter or my wife moved me into this community. So they go through a constant state of confusion all the time. So just if you can imagine being confused all day, where am I? Why am I here? I don't understand. Um, that is what happens when we wait too long to move somebody. Now that may happen too as you go through the illness, but it's what we're trying to give them the best chance for success.
That is so true because, my dad was probably in like the late moderate when we moved him. And it was actually because, and this happens with some caregiving parents too, it's like they just aren't ready to do it until some crisis happens. And then they're just like, I just can't do this anymore. Right. So we were lucky in that, my dad is still, I would say it's hard to say. Like he's either like late moderate or early late stage.
Mhm.
But I know that like he goes to the activities every day. I can tell that like he's really able to make the most out of it because he's not in the very late stages, right? Where he's just in bed all the time. So I think that was actually really good timing. So yeah, I completely agree with your statement. Let's talk about the 4 recommendations you have for this process, Peggy, like from the very beginning when I say, okay, I think it's time for, to move my parent into dementia care, um, all the way to move-in day.
So the best thing that I think I can say, and I think probably one of the most important things is do your research. I mean, it's really important to get out there, look at communities, look at the interactions that the staff and the residents are having. Um, do you want your loved one to be geographically close to you, or maybe there's a financial concern. So sometimes I have families who, or say they give me a budget, and so we have to go a little further out. But doing that research is really important, and there's a lot of things to consider when you're looking at a community. Obviously, price is important to a lot of people. It's not an inexpensive process. But more important, I think, is when you go into a community, look around. Does it smell good? Um, is it kept up? So it doesn't have to be, the Taj Mahal, but are the walls painted and is the carpet clean and things like that. Do you see staff and residents engaging with each other, or is staff just walking down the hall blindly? Do they say hello to you? I mean, these are things in my career that I look for whenever I walk into a community. Does the staff, if there's a stranger walking by, do they stop and say, "Oh, hey, how are you? I don't think we've met before. I'm Susie. How can I help you?" Those are important things because you don't want your loved one to be in a community where just strangers are walking around. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
um, but really do your research. And I don't think you need 20 communities. You don't need to be looking at 20 communities. That's so overwhelming. It's too much. Even 10 communities is more, I think, too much. But 3, 4 communities that you feel will meet your loved one's needs really is all you need to look at. So
Yeah, and I think it's important too to you mentioned visiting, Peggy. I think it's important to visit, at least a couple times, and I mean even better, bring your forgetful parent to the one that you think might be the best match. I don't know that you want to bring them to like each place necessarily because
no,
as Peggy mentioned, like they're kind of feeling confused anyway, especially when they're in a different setting. So we don't want to add too much stress to their lives. But,
right.
what I did with my dad is, I had a place in mind for a couple of years before he was in the state where we were ready to move him. I brought him there a couple of times just to see like what his reaction was. I knew I liked it, but
Hmm.
and the way that I knew that it was the best fit for him, I've shared on this channel before that he's not a man of many words because he has aphasia, so he's not able to really say coherent sentences anymore. But we were sitting around the table and playing a card game, and my dad does not even like cards, and he still does not like cards. But he was surrounded by gentlemen that were around his age that all had cognitive impairments, and I could just see like his eyes literally lit up. So I could tell that he really enjoyed being there. He didn't want to leave. These are signs that it's a really good fit for your forgetful
Yeah,
parent.
that's a really excellent point. Once you identify, and I think just to clarify it, identify the place where you feel like I feel good here. I mean, that's really important as the person making the decision. Um, take them to an activity, just like you said, and like you did, take them to a meal. Look at the meals. How are the meals good? People my husband, who's in food service and he used to work in retirement communities too, used to tell me all the time the 3 most important thing in a senior's life is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if you think about it, it is. It's the we get up, they look forward to breakfast, you look forward to lunch, and it's also a social engagement. So having a meal in a community is also really important. Do you like the food? um, but the other thing you said, and I think is really important to kind of pull out, is visit at different times of the day and unannounced. Don't just say, "Oh, I'm going to come by at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock." Just come by at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. Say, "Hey, I just want to look at the room again. Just want to see. Do you have a minute, or can I walk around?" And if they let you walk around unescorted, that would be ideal because then you can kind of see things. But I'd be
Right,
shocked
because
if anyone did
right, because if they escort you, they're sort of controlling what you're going to see and what you're not going to see.
right.
That's a good
But
point.
it says a lot if they let you go by yourself. Like, "Oh gosh, we're really confident. Go. They're doing an activity back there. Have fun. Go join them." That,
Right,
you know,
right.
and those are good things because you will get a good feel on what happens day to day.
Yeah,
So,
I think it is really important to kind of catch them, unaware, for lack of a better word,
yeah,
because then they can't, make it the best experience ever, right? It's
right,
just what it is day to day, and that's
right,
really what your forgetful parent is going to experience.
right. And I think that'll give you peace of mind too. So,
Yes, that's very true. That's very true. And then, what about when you have picked a place and your caregiving parent is all in and everything, and so what, like, approximately when the move is going to happen? There a recommendation you have for then, Peggy?
yeah. So, one of the biggest mistakes I see people do and make is say, "Okay, so you've taken your loved one to the community, you can see that they like it, and you go, 'Hey, Dad, isn't this a great place? How about you move here? And all of a sudden dad freaks out because no, he's comfortable in his home. He doesn't want to make a change. And if you think about it, change is hard even if we don't have a dementia. And when we do, it's even scarier. So if you the point of telling them is really for you. You're trying to ease your guilt, you're trying to get their buy-in, and they're not going to be able to give it to you. They won't give it to you. And even if they can't and you're just going to cause more agitation in their life up until the move. They're going to be more anxious. They may not remember why they're anxious. They may not remember why they're feeling nervous or frustrated or even scared, but they will have that emotion. Emotions stick with us. So, my recommendation, and I think many people working with dementia will say, do not share the information until the day comes. And even I wouldn't even do it that morning. I'd say, come on, dad,
Yep.
you know, or mom or whoever, we're going to go.
Yes, all of that is so true. And that's one thing that I didn't know before I went to Peggy's presentation is the fact that we don't tell our forgetful parent what's going on. And I think that's why, because you don't want to say, as you said, Peggy, like, hey, mom, don't you really like it here? Like, wouldn't this be a great place to move? You don't even need to say that verbally. Just be an investigator and observe how they react when they're there, right? Just like I did with my dad. So that's important, and that's why, again, it's really, really good that you bring them with you to visit the place that you really feel good about. The second thing is, after Peggy's presentation, I called my mom, my caregiving parent, and basically, shared it with her that, like, it's really better if we just don't tell dad about the move. And I know, like, she was super conflicted about this just because, that was her equal partner in crime, I guess. And like,
Yeah, yeah.
they're, always share everything with each other, right? And so she felt like she was betraying the love of her life, and she needed to live with that every day. So I don't understand that because I'm not living with my dad, but just, I can really sympathize with my mom and how hard that was. But I can tell you it was so worth it because we had a seamless move in. My dad was happy, like, the day after he moved in, he was already hugging other residents, right? Like, he's just so happy that he's in a place now with people like him, right? So so I think that's really important. And
I want to touch on something you just said because I think it's really important. You said he's really happy that he's in a place with other people like him. And we don't, I think when we have our loved one at home, we don't recognize that they are struggling so hard every day to be like to be like the parent, the one who doesn't have dementia. They're trying so hard to just answer correctly and say the right things and do the right things.
Mhm.
And then when they move to an environment where, oh wow, look, Joe forgets too, and it's like this huge weight is being lifted off their shoulders, and then they get a little bit of it, little back. They get, God, I don't have to try so hard all day long. And it's if you, I mean, just put yourself in their shoes. Maybe you're in an environment where um, you're out of your own element. Maybe you're at for me, it would be like a science festival and all these people talking scientifically right over my head. I'd be like, I have no idea what these people are talking about. I mean, that's how they feel every day.
Totally, totally. And the day that I brought him to memory care, I really struggled because, when I had talked to my dad about not driving anymore, I was very honest with him and I was actually sobbing next to him, but I think in this case, since my dad was in the later stages, I kind of played it by ear that day to see, like, okay, would I be able to tell him about this? Would he understand what I'm saying? And so instead of really saying, like, hey, dad, I'm moving you today, I said, something like, hey, dad, remember this place that we visited? I had a friend there, Tracy, that worked there, and he remembered Tracy. So I said, we're going to go visit Tracy. And we're gonna see what she's up to, and I said they're gonna take care of you, and that is actually my way of saying like we're moving you. But
Yeah.
it was much more positive, and it was a little vague, but it was also not lying.
Yeah.
And that's what I felt best about
Right.
at that point. And so it's really, I hate to like give this, well, it depends type answer, because I know I hate hearing that sometimes when it's talking about my forgetful parent. But honestly, um, you have to know what's best for your forgetful parent, and you as a daughter know them very well. How do you think they might react? It's totally up to you, and you will not make the wrong decision, right? Because this is all really hard. So
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think, I like how you said, a lot of people think that not telling them is lying to them. Um, and it's true. I know people feel that way, but the way you did it was you have to find the truth in what's happening. And then, and that ages, I think, are conscious a little bit. Um, but, in the end, and recognize it sounds like your dad had a successful, wonderful transition. Um, that may not happen with everybody, but just take it day by day and recognize that it's going to get better.
yes, and I think it's also important, and something that I learned from you is just always being positive, you know?
Yep.
And so like when I shared that with my dad, it took me a long time to get out those words because I was trying not to start crying, right? Because if he saw me start crying, then he would start crying, and he would, just feel upset, and he wouldn't know why, and it would just ruin the whole experience. So it's, definitely speak from your heart, whatever your heart wants to say. I wouldn't try to plan it out, and try to stay positive and calm.
Yep. I agree. I agree.
Yeah. So, kind of as far as the move in, Peggy, is there a time that's ideal when you want to, bring your forgetful parent to memory care and move them in?
So, yeah, I mean, most of us who know that if we have a cognitive impairment, as the day progresses, the harder it becomes. So, mornings are always better. Anytime before lunch is usually ideal. I always recommend before lunch because then they're at their best for the day. B, it gives you time to be there and to engage with the community in some way because they're usually doing activities. Um, up until lunchtime. And then you have the opportunity to sit down and have a meal with your loved one. And it gives you something to do together. So, oh yeah, we're here and we're having lunch. But it also, if you're a little nervous about how am I going to leave? How am I going to leave my parent here? It gives you the opportunity to have an out. So you have lunch, you leave after lunch, and then the community kind of takes over and helps your dad get involved in what's happening in the afternoon.
And one thing too that I found super helpful, my mom and I did, we actually set up my dad's room before I brought him to move in. So,
So important.
yes, yes. And so, can you talk a little bit, Peggy, about like what maybe to put in the room, um, that what might be good, and then what to pack for them as well?
Sure. So you want to make the room as familiar as possible. So depending on what type of community you move to, your space might be different. But typically, you want to have those things that that your loved one is going to recognize. So if they really resonate with, like for women, sometimes it's like a favorite comforter or pictures of their children and husband. If they're a photographer, have some of their photography things. If you have like um, a picture of your mom and dad when they first got married, those are really important things. Although I will say, don't put the originals in there. Make copies of those
Yes.
photos. Anything that you can think of, like if dad has a favorite chair, bring the favorite chair. Those things that that they're going to connect, they're going to make them feel most comfortable. I'm a huge fan of picture books, like picture photo albums, because then they look through it and they recognize those people. And remember, they're seeing themselves as a much younger person than they are. So picture books of when the family was younger are ideal. But I do recommend that you set that room up, set their apartment room, whatever it is, up before they move in. So the day that they move in, everything is good to go. You're not distracted by putting clothes in the drawer or whatever. That is very stressful and that is very overwhelming for somebody.
Yeah, so I think it's really important for the forgetful parent to, feel at home in their new home, like with their room, and definitely, my dad looks at his photo album probably every day, and it's something for my mom and I to do too when we visit him and kind of go through
Yeah,
pictures. I think also like he loves seeing pictures of himself when he was younger, right?
yeah,
Because that might be how he's identifying himself now. Maybe he feels like a 20-year-old, and so
right.
you know that's actually how
Yeah.
old around I think my dad is right now. And then the other thing is that it really helps you as a daughter and your caregiving parent not only connect, over this transition when you both are setting up the room, but it also allows you to kind of, for lack of a better word, like feel like you're blessing the room. It's kind of like a housewarming. I'll always remember that experience with my mom, and I think too, we like to feel like we have some kind of control when dementia comes into our lives, and it's kind of a way to figure out like what shirts are going to go in dad's dresser, or what pictures am I going to put up in mom's room. Maybe she was an art collector and maybe I can hang up some frames, and really make it her own. So for long distance daughters who feel like they really don't have time to do this research, and maybe they're living like a country away and can't visit the communities locally, how are they going to do it all themselves?
So, I mean, there's definitely people out there that can help with the journey. I'm a huge believer in finding someone to help you with it. There's a lot of reasons that I think people need someone outside of the family situation to help. Typically, you're making this decision and you're emotional about it. It's difficult. It's not something you want to be doing. Um, the other, you're overwhelmed because you're trying to help mom and dad, and there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle. How do I know I'm making the right choice? Am I asking the right questions? So I think families, when they're looking, they're not they think they're asking all the questions, but there's some questions that, for things that could happen maybe down the road that maybe aren't happening now, and they need to be addressed now. I mean, when I was running communities, the hardest thing I did was to say to a family, I'm sorry, we can't meet your needs anymore. And, this family, gets a look of terror. What, I just went through this. Why am I having to do this again? So when you have someone working with you, they can really help, kind of flush out all the questions that maybe you're not thinking about because you got so much on your mind. So
Right.
me, I think an advocate is always a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. And I think so if you see people with title, geriatric care manager, I think now they're called aging life care managers.
Yeah.
Um, and oh, and I think Peggy, I don't know that we talked about what your title is and your credentials.
So, I still hold my assisted living administrator's license because I really feel it's important to stay up on what's happening in senior living and assisted living. I hold that license in both Virginia and Maryland. One of the things that I do in my business is I actually talk about, tell me what your dad likes to do. Tell me what your mom likes to do. What did they do? Who are they today? Do you like large settings, big settings? Do they want to go to like the Kennedy Center? Do they want to go, or are they more homebodies? Do they like to watch birds? There's a lot of things that really make up somebody's well-being that have nothing to do with if they get a shower, get dressed every day. So those are things that we want to, that you really want to look for, communities that can provide what your expectations are. I mean, the hardest thing I did running a community was meeting everybody's expectations because out of 100 people, I had 100 different expectations. So if you know what your expectation is, like, look, I don't care what my mom does. I just want her to have a shower every day, or I want her to have a shower once a week. Then let's find those communities that are not only going to support what your expectation is, but also save you the most money. So if you don't care if she goes to the Kennedy Center, let's not look at communities that do that, because you'll pay for that in some way.
Yes, and I think you can speak to this too as a past executive director. It makes your job easier when it's a better fit, because I mean, it not only makes your job easier, but it makes you happier, and
Right.
the quality of care better, because all the employees, that's why they picked your company to work at, because they felt it was a good fit for them, the culture.
Right.
So if everyone is on the same page, everyone is happy.
Well, agree. And when when your families as a running a community feels that their expectations are being met, everything is better. The community's happier, the flow goes better, you have less complaints, and the family feels like you're part of like they're part of the community, and that's really important. So
And so, Peggy, I know this is difficult, but if you had to sum up this interview to one takeaway point specific to long distance daughters who are secondary caregivers, what would it
the fact that we don't think about, of making this move, we think about all the negative stuff. We think about, oh, it's going to be so hard, and everything we have to do and how emotional it all is. But honestly, you get your loved one back, even if it's for a short time. I mean, I've seen spouses who don't even recognize their husbands anymore, who start to recognize them as their spouse again, not just the nice person who takes
cool? Yeah.
the nice man who takes care of me. You know, it happens a lot, and it's happened a lot. It's not just like a one-off thing. So it is a nice side effect, especially if you find the right place and you can feel good about where your loved one is. So
Yeah. And I think that is so important, since this channel is about discovering joy in dementia. It's less stressful for everyone involved. Like Peggy, you talked about how the forgetful parent feels like they need to be on all the time, and now they don't feel that way anymore. And then you have your caregiving parent who's like, oh my gosh, I'm, the wife or husband again, and I can, leave the situation and come back when I want to. I'm not like, I don't feel, I know some caregivers really feel like sometimes they're obligated to have that role because they never asked for it, right? This dementia thing just plopped in their lap, and just they're dealing with it and surviving. And then you, as the daughter, have a peace of mind because you know that your forgetful parent is being taken care of, by people that you and your caregiving parent have vetted. So, yeah, so it's really good all around. So while it's really, heart wrenching, I think is a wonderful word to use, Peggy. It really ends up being so much easier afterwards. And then, like, you as a long distance daughter can start to plan, an outing for, to do with your forgetful parent. And it's sort of like, I'm bringing him to these like botanical gardens around me, and art museums and things like that. So it's pretty awesome. So Peggy, I know you talked about your services already a little bit, but I just wanted to double check. So you help people find a good fit, senior living community for free?
I do. I do. So I use my years of experience, and I have to say, people who do what I do, help you find senior living options, nobody, at least in this area, nobody actually has actual senior living experience. And I think that's really important. And it was one of the reasons I started my business, was like, you need to understand not what happens on the front end, but what happens on the back end, especially if you're helping someone. So I can look at someone and know pretty much what their care needs are going to be, and can this community match the care needs for this person. But I used that experience. So I started this business, and I didn't want to have to charge the family, because senior living is already a very pricey thing. It's like a buyer's agent for senior living. So I get paid by referral, as if someone moves in. So
Awesome. And I think, I feel like this is so much more personal than, what is that website called? A Place for Mom. Um,
yes,
Whereas, like, you're not getting 16 million emails of these places that are, near your parents' zip code, but you don't even know if it's necessarily a good fit. I like
right.
how more personal this is and more tailored.
So I actually I go on the tours with you. I listen to you, I ask all the right questions, and then I help you through the process. I think the best thing that I do with my business, and this I added this to the business because I was an executive director, is I stay with this family for the next 30 days, next 4 weeks, to make sure that the transition goes well. So I have a family who just committed to a community yesterday, and she was really nervous about doing it because she's going on vacation in a couple weeks. And I said, "Don't worry, I'm going to be there with your mom. I'm gonna be checking up on her, and I will tell you." So I'm an impartial person checking on this person and saying, "Hey, she's doing great," or "You know what, she's having a bad day today, but this is what we did, and this is how I helped her, and this is what the community did." So I think that transition piece is probably the best part of my business, honestly. Anyone can Google communities, anybody can do it. I live in this market, tell me where to go, but that doesn't mean it's the right fit for your loved one. And then you have that reassurance that someone else who understands the business is actually checking up on them. So
I love that because the dementia care place that we moved my dad into, they call with like pretty regular updates, especially right after we moved my dad in. But I know not all places are like that. So I think
yeah,
that's awesome that, you offer that service to just, not only do you have sort of a more objective point of view, but you know exactly what to look for in staff, because you were an executive director in the past. And so that's you know, um, some expertise that you bring to the table.
right. And I really, I'll stay with my clients for forever. So if they call me 2 years down the road and say, "Hey, this is happening. What do you think? What should I do?" I'm going to absolutely counsel them, and it's not going to cost them anything. Because it's all about, I mean, this is someone's end of life. Typically, this is where they're going to be. So we want to make it the best possible opportunity to be successful, not just for you as the caregiver, but for them especially. So
That's awesome. I love that. And so, speaking of helping people, like even after you work with them, how about geographically? So, I know that quite a few of my viewers are outside of the DC area. I even have some international viewers. So, where can we find you, Peggy? And can they contact you even if they don't live in the DC metro area?
absolutely. I mean, my business is stationed in the DC metro area. But if you have a question, please call me. I'm happy to help you. I mean, this is a difficult decision. So they can reach me either email, which is just Peggy, PGGY, at a family tie.com, or they can call me, and feel free to call me. It's 240-778-9920. That's actually my cell number. So my phone's always with me. If I don't pick up, it's usually because I'm with a client, but I will call you back. So
That is so awesome. And I'll actually include Peggy's website and her email and phone number as well in the description below. So you can check that out. So thank you so much, Peggy, for joining us today. And I think that this has been super helpful for us that are, coming up to this time where we're really feeling like, I don't know how, my forgetful parent is doing at home. I feel like it might be time to move them to somewhere where they need more care. So thank you so much for joining me and sharing your knowledge.
you're very welcome. Thanks for having me, and good luck, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining me today, and would love it if you could subscribe. So if you click the subscribe button below, and I will see you next month for my next guest expert speaker. Bye.